Well, so Dave, here's what I do know. Um, I do know you're the Associate Director of Intelligence and Security Initiative. The collars, can you tell I have used up all my word quota today? The College of Letters and Science with the University of Wisconsin in Madison. You are also the director for research with Wisconsin Security Research Consortium. And Dave, I apologize. I don't have anything else. So I'm going to let you do a little bit of intro on yourself.
That's okay. I can do that. And 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 just to make it even more challenging, I got a new job, so I have a new title at UW-Madison. But I am at UW-Madison. But thank you, Sean, and thank you, Mike. Um, I I, I I'm going to be talking today about this topic of utilization of National Guard cyber forces in Title 32 status for national cyber missions. This is a really kind of arcane topic, but it's something that is of interest to a lot of policymakers now in the United States. And so that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So to open this, I just want to acknowledge the partners that I've worked with on this research. Um, so Dakota State University, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and the Wisconsin National Guard Federated Cyber Program. And I have some other acknowledgments here because this is also work that I'm doing for my dissertation as part of PhD research. And, uh, and this is something that's been near and dear to my heart for many, many years. And before I even started working in this program, and of course, I have to thank my wife for putting up with all the time that I've spent on this. And those of you watching who are doing your own research at any level can appreciate the amount of time it takes. So this is just a little bit about me. So I did just step into a new role at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I'm now the director for national security initiatives. And we have a consortium in Wisconsin that also works to advance national security work. Um, I am also a cyber warfare officer in the Wisconsin Army National Guard, and previously had served as a cryptologic warfare officer in the Navy Reserve. I've been at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for 30 years, always working in something related to information technology or cyber or national security partnerships. And in the last few years, I've been really focused on the national security side to include things that connect with cyber. And so that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today um, on this program. And so I'm going to tell you a few things that you probably already know, and I won't read the slides to you, but this is something that General Paul Nakasone, who was previously the director of the National Security Agency, Commander U.S. Cyber Command, said about cybersecurity. And a little bit of the context of how we think about working with industry and academia and the interagency and the Guard and Reserve on cybersecurity challenges. General Nakasone is now the inaugural director of the National Security Institute at Vanderbilt. And he continues to work on some of these problems. And here's something that another senior leader has said, our previous chief of the National Guard Bureau. This is the member of the Joint Chiefs that oversees the National Guard. And he also indicates cyber warfare is not just our future, it's our contemporary reality. The National Guard is unique in that its members are also work in the civilian world. And in cyber in particular, most of the folks who work in cyber positions in the National Guard, whether it be a cyber warfare officer like myself or the specialists and technicians that we have working on the cyber teams, are often cyber professionals in the civilian world. So they do this day in, day out. They are practitioners, they are experts, they are often they're working in industry, they're working in government, they're working in the intelligence community, they're working in the public and private sector in cyber. bringing you forward to our most recent director of the National Security Agency and Commander U.S. Cyber Command, again, exploring innovative ways to use the National Guard and reserves. And then again, 1 year later, General Hartman, the current acting director of the National Security Agency, you'll notice there's some similarity here. This is the exact same quote. Now, this is prepared testimony before Congress, but it just shows that the position of U.S. Cyber Command has stayed the same, even through leaders, through presidential administrations. We have the same priorities on engaging the National Guard with this problem set. And why is that important? Because we've got this deep expertise that is distributed across the country on cybersecurity. You'll see people ask, when we hear about the ransomware attacks that either happen against state governments, like we just saw with Nevada, or like or local municipalities, like we saw with the city of St. Paul last month in Minnesota, or companies that fall victim to cyber attacks, and whether they be by nation state actors or criminal gangs or a mix of the two. Often people will ask, well, why, where's U.S. Cyber Command? Why is the military doing something about this? And the answer is it's complex, and we'll talk about a little bit about why as we get into this presentation. So our current chief of the National Guard Bureau, same thing. We want to leverage that expertise. And then just a couple of months ago, again, talking about that expertise that's resident in the National Guard. Okay, so now I've sold you on this idea that we've got a lot of expertise in the National Guard to work on cyber. And we need to effectively utilize that force. So the reason I started looking into this really goes back about 15 years for me. But we need to utilize the expertise that we have in that force. And our leadership clearly has said that the expertise is there and we should be utilizing it. And we've got to align that expertise with national cyber mission needs. So what I am coming to this problem with is two questions. What elements of current law and policy support or constrain the utilization of National Guard personnel in Title 32 status? Now, I'm saying Title 32. I've said Title 32 a couple times, and you might be wondering, what on earth is that? What is Title 32? And I promise that I will tell you what that is. And what precedent, expert opinion, and policy analysis enable or challenge the use of National Guard personnel in Title 32 status for these federal cyber missions? And so here's my research objectives. Again, I'm not going to read you the slide, but we really need to identify the current law and policy that supports or constrains the use of the National Guard forces for these roles, and look at the historical precedent or any precedent that's out there about how we can use the force in the context of cybersecurity for these missions. And how is this feasible? What are the implications? And then provide recommendations and create a brightly lit path for policymakers and unit commanders at all levels to have the confidence they need to use the force for these missions. So here's the hypothesis, simply stated. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the details of why this is such a complex problem. So the message that we've gotten from Congress, and I'll talk about a little bit about that too, and from our leadership, is pretty clear. We need to be doing this, right? But when we actually try to do it, and when we talk about this operationally, and look at implementing these things, it becomes clear pretty quickly that the devil's in the details. And why is that? It's because of the authorities landscape. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what this landscape looks like. This could be its own seminar. This could be its own course. There are people who go to law school and do nothing but this for the military. And we'll just touch on it a little bit here. But the authority and responsibility for military operations conducted by the National Guard is derived primarily from two places: the Constitution and Titles 10 and 32 of the United States Code. So there's Title 32. And we'll talk about what specifically Title 32 is in a moment. But you look at that bold last half sentence of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16, that talks about the militia and the training of the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So that wording is what tethers the National Guard to being a professional military force and being held to the same standard as our active duty military forces. And that is how this all happens is detailed in Title 32 of United States Code. So here's another look at some of the legal authorities. So these are all sections of US Code that deal with different things like the State Department and diplomacy, and the Coast Guard, the Department of Homeland Security, our intelligence community, the armed forces, and there you see the National Guard as Title 32. Here's another view of just some of the entities, and you can see Title 32 there, the National Guard, and then the connection to their role in cyberspace. Cyberspace is a domain of warfare, just like land, maritime, air, and space. And so doctrinally, the military sees, even though it's a man-made domain, we see it as a domain of warfare. And you might have also heard discussions about whether or not we should have a separate military service for cyber, like a US cyber force, somewhat akin to the US Space Force for the space domain, which is our newest military service. And that's a separate debate that's going on in policy circles. But in the meantime, we do have these different connections to cyberspace of these different elements of government power. And so, here's one way that Title 10 and Title 50 intersect when we talk about military operations and intelligence activities. And often cyber is circulating within or connecting to or operating across these realms. And so it can get complex pretty quickly, especially when you reach out and touch someone with something like offensive cyber operations, where you're not necessarily dropping a bomb or firing a bullet or a missile or some type of kinetic weapon at someone operating in a theater of war where you have to physically be someplace. I could be sitting here at my desk, whether it's a cyber criminal or a military cyber operator sitting at a console in Maryland or Texas or somewhere like that, and you're actually reaching out to an adversary network and creating real world effects that are either in the information space or potentially even in the physical space. And when you start involving in the interagency and the rest of the intelligence community, these are all different components of the intelligence community. There's a lot of crossover, there's a lot of interplay, and it gets complex really quickly. Now, the National Guard is over here, kind of on this island when it's operating in a Title 32 status, which is under the authority of the state governor, but training for its federal mission. And so we want to find out where these connect, specifically for cyber operations. And Congress has repeatedly tried to have National Guard cyber forces and reserve cyber forces integrated into what we call the Cyber Mission Force, which is the all military cyber forces. And they in turn are part of a larger DoD cyber operations forces, which also includes other personnel beyond just military personnel. And the things that Congress has been directing the services to do, there's an example for the Army being directed to include Guard and Reserve cyber forces in the Cyber Mission Force, have not been implemented, or at least have not been fully implemented. And the reason this is important is because the Cyber Mission Force, the CMF, is the way that cyber forces get exposed to the parts of government that will utilize them, like US Cyber Command or the Cyber National Mission Force. And these are the forces that when a commander or a policymaker or the president says, or the Secretary of Defense says, hey, I need to have this action undertaken, what forces are available to do this? That's how the forces are exposed. So not having them be exposed in this way also brings challenges. There's a lot of reasons for this. Again, there's complexity, and it's a problem that we have to get after, though. So again, there the previous to this last FY's National Defense Authorization Act, which is the annual bill that talks about what we're going to do with military forces, again raised this issue and said pretty clearly, we have talked for over a decade about how we're going to get after this problem, and these things that we've asked for have not occurred. And please explain this. And so there's been a lot of talk about how we can use the National Guard in Title 32 status or at all to get after national cyber missions. But absent the legislative change, what are we going to do to get after this problem? Here's another thing that we're talking about in the upcoming FY26 NDAA. This is in the Senate version. Again, not going to read you the text, but suffice it to say, we're still talking about this problem. So most of the proposed solutions have come in War College papers or working papers, and they all say essentially, we could do great things with the National Guard Cyber Force if only the law were changed to say this, or if the policy were changed in this way, we could do these things with National Guard cyber forces. Well, if those policy and legislative changes are not forthcoming, and I'm not saying that they may never be forthcoming, but for the last 15 years they have not been, and so here we are, and there's been limited formal work in this realm. There have been a lot of articles and blogs and War College papers and things like that written, but what can we do in this space without changes to law and policy? So there is precedent in the world of reserve and guard intelligence. So these are intelligence personnel, and there is a DoD policy because leaders in the reserve component intelligence community thought, it would be a really good idea if our reserve component in the military parlance includes the guard and the reserve. It would be really great if we could use these folks while they're in this what's called a drilling status, when they're going for their kind of 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year type thing that you hear about with the Guard and Reserve, because it's fundamentally part-time. You work in this part-time capacity until you're mobilized to conduct your federal mission. And it would be nice if we could use these personnel in a way that they're actually contributing to mission while they're in this part-time status, and they're able to practice their craft. So they're able to do real world work and feel like they're contributing to something meaningful, because they are. And that's something that motivates people, especially in these low density areas of expertise, whether it's intelligence or cyber, to keep serving and to keep, doing this additional thing that they do in their lives when you have all these other obligations, whether it's, civilian job or family or other things that you're doing in your life. So these people, we need to motivate them to do things, and we need to have them be able to utilize their craft. And so there's just, here's one paragraph that's in this policy, and it essentially doesn't, it's not, breaking new ground with the law. It's just saying, hey, we're going to use these people while they're in, these Title 32 statuses for support to real world intelligence work. And the Army took this and kind of operationalized this in the form of something called the Federated Intelligence Program. Takes intelligence personnel, uses them while they're drilling or doing part-time work, and has them work on real intelligence problems. maybe they're working for a combatant command like U.S. Central Command, or maybe they're working for a combat support agency like the Defense Intelligence Agency, and they are doing real world work and have pride in what they do. So can we do this for cyber? I would argue that we need to. Well, here's another policy. This is a DoD instruction that talks about just general how the reserve component is utilized. And in here, in this policy, it talks about how reserve component service members may be employed to support active component mission requirements as part of training duty, and that DoD missions and operational support may be accomplished incident to training. Well, what does that mean? It means that as long as you're meeting one of your training requirements, which, if you are a helicopter pilot, one of your training requirements is that you're going to be doing certain tasks to know how to fly a helicopter. And that means you're going to be flying helicopters when you're in Title 32 status and training. Well, might you be able to also accomplish a DoD operational mission if you're in this status, as long as you're meeting a training requirement? The answer to that is yes. So that's why you see things like flyovers, maybe at a stadium. How does that meeting a training requirement? Well, you need to know how to fly in formation, or you need to know how to conduct certain kinds of flight operations safely. And so that's why this meets a training requirement. So that's just one example. But if you're meeting a training requirement with cyber, you can do the same things. But what's the problem? Well, this instruction isn't explicitly for cyber, and it says may and not shall. So it's not prescriptive. And for those of you who may know kind of the culture of the military, there is a lot of aversion to risk. And we're not willing to accept risk, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's because we want to do things right, we want to do them safely, we want to do the right thing. And so if you're not being explicitly directed or ordered or told to do something, there is a tendency to say, okay, we're not going to do that thing then, because we don't want to do the wrong thing. And so the problem persists. And here is what I think the core problem is. This is complex, it's ambiguous, and this really is not a technical problem. So even though I'm talking to you about issues that have deep implications for things like OT cybersecurity, because guess what? That's how U.S. Cyber Command wants to use the National Guard, is to go out and help organizations that might not have all of their own capabilities or might not understand the true scope of the threat, how to protect their resources. But how are we going to get after that problem, if we have these challenges we're talking about? So this really isn't a technical problem. This is a policy problem. This is an organizational behavior problem. And it is really complex. And I have this slide in here that just shows how the US military doctrinally thinks about the different categories of cyberspace operations, and then who's responsible for conducting them. So on the right side of this slide, you see all the different types of teams, all the different parts of the CMF that conduct these tasks. And on the left-hand side, you see the different types of cyberspace operations, missions, and actions, all the way from defense up to exploitation and offensive operations. And another look at, just some of the organizational structures and where some of the authorities flow: operational control, tactical control. These are all things that are very important in military command structures and organizational structure. So again, just showing this here to say that it's complex. And in the National Guard, we have a lot of these different types of units. So just like the active force has, cyber protection teams and cyber mission teams and combat mission teams, we have these same types of constructs, some direct and some approximated in both the Army and Air National Guard. And these units need to train to the same standard as the active force. And so in order to maintain proficiency and be, even if they might be OT cybersecurity experts, they might be CISOs, they might be experts in their craft in the civilian world, they still need to translate that to how we do things with military cyber operations. And that means the more closely you are training like you fight, the better off you're going to be when the balloon goes up and you need to actually get mobilized into active duty or called into service by the state governor to use those skill sets in an operational capacity. So my hypothesis restated is that we can use the National Guard in a Title 32 status to do certain protective or defensive functions. So these are things that align with defensive cyberspace operations in a doctrinal sense. And that means things like, specifically cyberspace defense, or what we call DCO, internal defensive measures, is where that's organized under. So normal defensive and cybersecurity operations. These are things we understand as being protective. These are things that are not, like hack back, that you're not reaching out and touching someone offensively. You're not reaching out and touching, a system or a network in China or Russia or Iran or North Korea or somewhere else in the world. And so we don't get into some of the really hairy issues with offensive cyber, and, where you really want to be on the Title 10 or intelligence side of the house. Here, there's plenty of work to be done in securing our own systems and networks in the United States that can be done in the context of DCO. So where do we want to be? We want to be in this place where we're clearly fulfilling a training requirement on what's called our METL, or Mission Essential Task List, which every single occupation in the military has one of these. And also something that might be fulfilling a mission requirement on the operational side. And the overlap of those is the sweet spot. That's where we can do Title 32 support under existing law and policy. And so I have a couple of other pictures in here that aren't cyber related. You see some infantry soldiers up in the upper right wearing their IVAS goggles, and then you see a helicopter down the left. That's because we've got helicopter pilots and infantry soldiers who need to train, and they need to use their weapon systems like helicopters, or they need to get in their gear and go out in the field and train just like they would be doing if they were on an operational mission. And so we can do those same things with cyber. And so how do we address the problem? Well, National Guard personnel are in Title 32 status for these things that we were talking about. When they go to drill on the weekends, when they're doing their annual training for 2 weeks, or when they're activated for operational support. All of these order types support training for the federal mission. So we need to find tasks that are training tasks that also fulfill a mission requirement. The primary priority always has to be training, and that secondary benefit is the mission support. And so a lot of the work that needs to go into this is identifying those use cases that are able to fit into this feasibly. And so how are we going to find solutions? We're going to look to existing law and policy as it is, instead of saying, boy, I wish it could be changed to say this. We're going to find examples of precedent. We're going to find consensus, and we're going to talk about things that have happened successfully in this area, so we can give National Guard leaders at this middle layer between our senior leaders who are clearly saying what we should be doing, and our soldiers and airmen who want to be doing things that are meaningful and productive and feel like they're contributing. What do we do in the middle to make that happen? And I think I've made the case for why we should be doing this. This is as much about recruiting and retention, because of people feeling that they're contributing to something meaningful, because these people are often, they're, like I said, they're cyber professionals. They're making a good salary. Some of these people who are very junior are making a lot of money in the civilian world. They don't need these small bonuses or little carrots that we can dangle in front of them on the military side. That's not going to make up for whatever their decision calculus is on why they might make a choice to stay in uniform. They're going to stay in uniform because they feel like they're doing something important. And just as important as that is supporting the mission. So these things are both important. And so I'm approaching this. I'm not going to talk in detail about this. I'm approaching this with a very clear analysis of the things that are already out there that support this use. And the other thing that we're doing is a survey instrument, which is live now, which seeks to engage people who have some type of familiarity or authority or connection to military cyber and preferably the National Guard as well, and how these things interact, and asking questions about what their experiences are and what their opinions are about this realm that we're talking about. And then I want to close by talking about a case study of something that we've done in Wisconsin. So we've had a pilot program running with the Wisconsin Army National Guard, with our detachment of the cyber protection team, the 176 cyber protection team, which was mobilized on active duty for 400 days, supporting this thing called Task Force Echo, which has been stood down, but which is a task force that was actively supporting cyberspace operations in support of U.S. Cyber Command and the Cyber National Mission Force. But after we were coming off that mobilization, we wanted to look for ways to still continue to do meaningful work. So people were asking, boy, what's next? What can I do next? What are we going to do next? And so we met with a partner in the intelligence community and got a memorandum of agreement in place. And we started working on this thing that we call the Wisconsin Federated Cyber Program. So this Federated Cyber Program name is kind of a tip of the hat to the Federated Intelligence Program, because folks in the Army, Guard, and Reserve understand what the Federated Intelligence Program, or FIP, is. And so when we say Federated Cyber Program, a lot of times people will say, oh, it's like FIP, but for cyber. And that's exactly right. So we provide support to this intelligence community partner. It provides cybersecurity research and situational awareness. Senior leadership has been briefed on this. And the intelligence community partner is happy to work with us, personnel in any occupational specialty, as long as they have the interest. So they don't necessarily need to be in a cyber specialty. And they can be supporting this mission set while they're in a Title 32 status. In our case, we use cyber personnel who the Army identifies with, every occupational specialty or MOS in the military has got a number and a letter associated with it. So in our case, for cyber, a 17A or 17 Alpha is a cyber warfare officer, a 17 Charlie is a cyber operations specialist. And we use these people in various types of units to conduct things that are consistent with defensive cyberspace operations. And those are some of the guidance that has been promulgated by U.S. Cyber Command and Army Cyber Command that also meet a mission requirement. So if you can imagine the kinds of things we are talking about in cybersecurity right now, it's things like, how can we help our smaller things like school districts or utilities or co-ops in the states who have a big target painted on them, who are very attractive to whether it's criminal gangs or nation states that are operating power, water, transportation, and then other things like school systems on the education side, anything that is a target, elections, municipalities, counties, you name it, these things are targets, and they all have wildly varying levels of expertise on how to deal with a cyber attack. And we want to bring the National Guard forces to bear in a consistent way on these problem sets. So that's a discussion that's happening at a much higher level than anything I'm talking about here. But what I'm wanting to create is a way that we can clearly use National Guard cyber forces for these types of missions, among other things. And so in our model, soldiers volunteer for this program, and they're doing some pretty simple things with cybersecurity, situational awareness, and research on a particular area of operation that is of interest to the intelligence community partner. And we put together a weekly cyber news summary. So this is a extremely simple thing, but it's filling an information gap that's really critical. And we're just, we're bringing additional manpower to this problem set. We're doing something real. We're doing something that's of value to the customer, and we're doing something that keeps people engaged. They can put it on their resume. They can, if they're looking to maybe break into working in the intelligence community or the Department of Defense doing cyber things, this is real world work that matters. And we operate in the context of this memorandum of agreement that we have between the agency and the Wisconsin National Guard. We explicitly enumerated the fact that we're going to do this in a Title 32 status in the MOA. And we use the personnel in exactly the role that they're trained in, and we avoid some of the other complexity that comes along with things being construed as an intelligence activity. This is not an intelligence activity, so we're not operating in that realm. This is just cybersecurity research. This is, in the civilian world, you might call this CTI, like cyber threat intelligence. We don't call this CTI because CTI, when in a military context, often kind of gets sucked over onto the intelligence side. But we're just doing general cybersecurity situational awareness and research. And that's one of the keys to our program because it reduces the complexity. And so here's an example of some of the work that we've done. This is just from the three first months of this year. Every once in a while, I'll update these numbers that we have in the slides, but they're pretty consistent with what we have today. So this is just some metrics about what it is that we're doing and who's involved. But here are some of the comments that we've gotten, and these are all from different customers. These are all from different people who are connected to the partner that we're serving, and these are unsolicited. I'm not going out and polling people and saying, "Hey, what do you think of what we're doing?" These are from full-time analysts and folks throughout the intelligence community and DoD that we are having a real impact on. And the other thing that I talked about before, retention, to take someone and train them, even if they are a cybersecurity expert and they are, the number one, OT hacker god in their kind of area of expertise, or whatever it is that they're working on, it still costs close to $500,000 to train them fully as a 17 Charlie, which is a cyber operations specialist in the Army. And so if we do that, we need to retain these people. And so we had two people decide that, what, I want to stay. I want to stay in uniform because for those of you who are not familiar, if you're in the military, every once in a while you're going to have a decision point about like, hey, am I going to re-enlist? Am I going to stick around? And a lot of these people, if you're not engaging them in meaningful work, or if they feel like it's not worth it for me to stick around, there's no reason for them to stick around. And so we're giving them a reason to stick around. And so that's another critical outcome of this work. And so these are just some of the things that we talk about that are issues with this case study. I won't go into detail on this, but we're providing real support to the community, to a lot of the agencies and entities that are involved with cyber in the United States. And for those of you who happen to have a CAC or are a part of the government yourself and have the ability to visit these URLs, those are places you can go to get more information. So the goal of this is again, like I said, we want to create a clear pathway to enable this kind of work, enable this kind of support in Title 32. There may be legislative changes, there may be policy changes that are going to come in the future that really carve out very specific use cases for the National Guard to do certain things in cyber. And one of the things that's being talked about right now, and there's actually a pilot going in some other states, is using the National Guard to bring expertise to OT cybersecurity mission sets, to work on defense critical infrastructure issues, off of DoD information network. So when we talk about things that are defense critical infrastructure, that are off DoD, or off DoD information networks, we are talking about things like power, water, transportation, things that the defense industrial base depends on to stay operational. And again, so a lot of you who are on this session will appreciate those kind of concerns, because those are things that are at the forefront of the national policy debate. And I should have had this slide up, but this is exactly what we're talking about here. Like I said, there's a survey instrument out there. So there is, this is something that can be shared with folks who may want to participate in this survey, who may have expertise. The IRB information and the eligibility information are on that website, and all that QR code does is lead to that website. And that concludes my formal part of the presentation, and I would open the floor for questions or discussion.
This is great, Dave. Thank you very much. So if anybody has questions, we would appreciate it if you would put it to, well, there's one. Oh, Mike, you beat me to it. If you would put your questions in the Q&A. So, Dave, I do have a question, because some of what you were talking about, and I apologize because I had to walk out of the room for a second. Is it scholarship for service?
So that's a good question. I am not doing that, but institutions that are CAE designated do, like Dakota State, like UW-Madison, and is Purdue also a CAE institution? Yeah. So you've got, so yes, this, cyber service academy, and other scholarship for service avenues are things that are out there. I'm not doing that
Okay.
for me, but I would really encourage people to look at that. I don't know how many of your students take advantage of that program.
So we have a few that have. We also have a pilot program called the Defense Civilian Training Corps that's
Okay.
very similar. So, but I also see your collection of challenge coins.
Ooh.
I might have to get one of these in the mail to you.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah, so I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. I will tell you, they have been a quiet bunch this semester.
Well, that's okay. I think that, I'm happy to just kind of generally talk about these things too. I mean, I would also open the floor for any general questions on, if people are wondering what military cyber operations are like, or some of the things that we think about, whether it's in the National Guard or in U.S. Command. I think that one of the real areas that we need to work on is partnerships between academic institutions and government and industry. Because when we talk, so we had General Hartman out to UW-Madison last year, and when he gave his keynote, he talked about the importance of partnerships. And when he speaks before Congress, and when he talks, I mean, this is a huge thing right now, and it's not just lip service. It is really important. And I think that students who are interested in the national security space, or faculty who are like, this is interesting, but I haven't worked with these agencies before. I mean, I know that this audience here is at least people who are interested in this space.
Yes, yes.
But it's a really important place for us to go.
So we actually, Sirius, we're going to be doing a CTF event with the Indiana Air National Guard. So
that's great.
Yeah, so we're and I don't have all the information yet, so I feel like I'm putting the cart before the horse, but eventually I will send it out to our students. And then shoot oh, you were talking about, oops, I had to grab some Tylenol, so I have you were also talking about the retention rate. Is that specific to careers and people that are interested in cyber within?
Yeah, occupation in the military has their own metrics on retention, and they have their own priorities and issues and things they talk about with how are we going to keep people? Because if you take, let's take a helicopter pilot, for instance. Um, it costs a lot of money to train someone to to train and maintain someone
Yeah.
as a helicopter, like let's say a Black Hawk pilot. And so we don't want to lose these people. And so, some of these occupational specialties will go after people with bonuses and say, hey, if you stick around, we will, if you re-enlist or if you decide to stay in for another 4 years or whatever the thing is, you will get a 20 or 60 or sometimes even up to $100,000 bonus. And we do that a little bit with cyber, but it's often not enough to really help people make that decision because they're making so much more money in the second realm.
We have this conversation with some of the partner organizations all the time. But here's what I say to them. And again, I am not trying to say anything disparaging about any industry partner. I also have a question for you. But look at the retention rates and the rates of attrition with some of the government and military organizations versus some of those very high dollar opportunities, right, in industry. So
Yeah,
there's something you have to balance it all.
that's right,
So I do have a question from Eric Franco. His question is, what
Eric.
recommendations do you have for civilian entities? Oh, he's got two actually. Wanting to establish a partnership with National Guard CY groups. How do they get started or even start the dialogue? And then the second part is, can civilian organizations receive some of the cyber intel products you were mentioning?
Well, Eric, thanks for the question. And I happen to know Eric. So Dr. Eric Franco is
Oh,
also
Dr.
the
Franco.
lead for the Wisconsin Cyber Response Team, or CRT, which is a
Great.
volunteer cyber incident response organization in Wisconsin that's similar to things that that other states have stood up, where they've got like a civilian cyber reserve or some type of incident response capacity or volunteer cyber capacity. Wisconsin is very robust thanks to the leadership of Dr. Franco. So thanks for the questions, Dr. Franco. And you can learn more about the Wisconsin Cyber Response Team if anyone wants to just Google that. It's a really interesting model and has a lot of folks who participate in it and respond to cyber incidents throughout the state. So for civilian entities, I think, I appreciate Dr. Franco's question here because, um, other states, I think, and other organizations are wondering how can they even get involved, or, will these people even want to talk to me? And I think that in most states now, not every state has a cyber protection team, or these different types of constructs we were talking about with the Air National Guard and Army National Guard, but almost every state has something. And these, I would say they should reach out to to their National Guard Public Affairs Office and just say, hey, I am this type of organization and I'm looking for information about, do you have a cyber team that we can talk to, that we could partner with? Or would you come out and talk to us on a topic? Most states are going to be happy to do something like that. And
Right.
most leadership in the National Guard or Departments of Military Affairs or analogous organizations in the states, I mean, these are all state organizations, they're state agencies. The people who make up these organizations are by and large citizens, community members in that state. And they would love to talk to other businesses or industry leaders in the state about these things. And so I think that just reaching out, just having someone reach out, and don't give up if maybe you don't get a call back or you don't get a response to that email. Try to reach out to someone else, because you're going to find someone who wants to talk about partnerships and who wants to figure out how to get after these problems together. And the second question, can civilian organizations receive some of the cyber intel products you're mentioning? So I know that Dr. Franco via the CRT provides a lot of these types of products to people who volunteer with the CRT. Most states have fusion centers or information sharing organizations. Sometimes that universities like Purdue or like UW-Madison can be and are a part of, information sharing and analysis centers. There's a couple of things that I want to share, and one of them is a beyond the CRT in Wisconsin, is an organization called InfraGard. InfraGard, and so a lot of people are probably familiar with InfraGard, and that's run by the FBI. They are not currently accepting new enrollments because they're going through a process where they're kind of moving their portal and everything over to a government site, and they have a different process for vetting people now. But that's one way of getting access to a lot of this, sometimes controlled and classified information or other levels of information sharing about cyber threat intelligence. And these organizations that are often volunteer groups in a state. Again, they're often run by a state entity. Sometimes, different states vary about how they do this. But people can volunteer. You don't have to join the military. You don't have to be in uniform. You don't have to do this. This is the only way that I'm talking about to do these things. And so, these information sharing and analysis centers, the fusion centers, the state agencies that are kind of tasked with doing this kind of information sharing, this is why they exist. And they are happy to share this kind of threat information throughout the state. And right now, the big discussion is, if some of this is not going to be happening at the federal level in the same way anymore, what are state and local, territorial and tribal organizations going to do? What are academic institutions going to do? So I think, organizations like yours are part of the way that we share and talk about research and issues and topics in these areas. So thanks very much for the question on that, Dr. Frank. And I want to share another thing here. I would just have this up in my other window. So I just want to put in a plug. This is a regional cyber exercise that actually Colonel Sarah Frater from the Indiana National Guard and Dr. Eric Franco, who's the deputy director of this exercise. This is the third year of the exercise. You all are welcome to visit this site, learn more about it. This is a cyber exercise that is aligned to FEMA Region 5, which includes Indiana. And we have military cyber teams, including from Indiana, and civilians, that come and participate in this event. So in fact, we use Muscatatuck, the Muscatatuck Urban Trading Center, as part of this exercise. So that's something that the Indiana state government and the Indiana National Guard runs. And we benefit from it. We all benefit from it. So here's another partnership example that kind of spans our state boundaries, because let's face it, adversaries are not making a distinction between, oh, you're in Indiana, you're in Wisconsin, you're in Minnesota. Oh, we won't attack you, but we'll attack this one. I mean, if you don't have the capability to respond to something like this, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So it's better if we all work together.
This is cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't have any other questions, but I want to thank you again for your time.
Absolutely.
And apologize for the discombobulation in the beginning. I couldn't get online. I'm not specific techie person, and I could not make it work. So thank you again. And Mike, do we have any other follow-ups?
No,
well, we made it all work in the end.
Yeah, it was great. Great talk.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
Great.
And we will stay in touch. I will let you know when we have our symposium next April. Love to have you come down.
Okay, well, my pleasure, and thank you for having me.